The man they mocked had saved them years before. Marcus Williams stood quietly in the corner of the luxury jewelry store, his weathered hands carefully examining a simple silver bracelet. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his dark skin, highlighting the small scars on his knuckles from years of hard work. His clothes were clean but worn, a faded blue button-down shirt and dark jeans that had seen better days. To anyone watching, he looked like he had wandered into the wrong place entirely. Behind the gleaming glass counter, 24-year-old Jessica Martinez was having the worst day of her life. Her younger sister Carmen had been in the hospital for 3 weeks now, and the medical bills were piling up faster than she could count. The experimental surgery Carmen needed would cost more money than Jessica made in 2 years. She had been working double shifts at the jewelry store, desperately trying to save every penny, but it felt hopeless. When she saw Marcus approach the counter, Jessica's stress boiled over into something ugly. "Excuse me," Marcus said softly, his voice carrying a slight rasp from years of working construction sites. "I'd like to see that bracelet in the case, please. The one with the small diamonds." Jessica looked up from her paperwork, her eyes immediately taking in Marcus's appearance. She saw the worn clothing, the calloused hands, the way he seemed out of place among the polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. In her mind, clouded by exhaustion and worry, she made an instant judgment. "Sir," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I think you might be confused about where you are. This particular piece costs $8,000. Marcus nodded patiently. "I understand. May I see it, please?" Jessica's laugh was sharp and cutting, loud enough that other customers turned to stare. The sound echoed off the high ceilings like a slap. "This isn't for people like you," she said, gesturing dismissively at his appearance. "Maybe you should try the mall down the street. They have some nice costume jewelry that might be more in your price range." The words hung in the air like poison. Other customers began to whisper among themselves, some pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a scene. An elderly white woman shook her head in disgust, though whether at Marcus or Jessica wasn't clear. A young couple moved away from the counter, uncomfortable with the tension. Marcus stood perfectly still, his dark eyes meeting Jessica's without anger, without defensiveness. There was something in his gaze that should have made her pause, a depth of understanding, a quiet strength that spoke of someone who had faced much worse than a store clerk's rudeness. But Jessica was too lost in her own pain to see it. "Furthermore," Jessica continued, her voice rising as her stress found an outlet, "I don't appreciate you wasting my time when I have real customers to serve. This is a high-end establishment, not a charity." The store manager, a thin man named Richard, appeared from the back office, drawn by the commotion. He took one look at Marcus and immediately sided with his employee. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone making it clear that he considered Marcus the problem. "No problem at all," Marcus replied quietly. His voice remained steady, controlled. "I was simply hoping to purchase a gift for someone special." Richard's smile was patronizing. "Sir, I think my associate was just trying to save you some embarrassment. Perhaps there's somewhere else that would be more suitable for your needs." The humiliation was complete now. Every person in the store was staring. Some were recording with their phones. The whispers grew louder. Marcus could feel the weight of their judgment, their assumptions, their dismissal of his worth based solely on his appearance. But instead of anger, something else flickered across Marcus's face. A flash of recognition as he looked more closely at Jessica. Something about her features, her voice, triggered a memory from 3 years ago. A memory of a terrified young woman in a hospital waiting room, crying over her sister's diagnosis. "Jessica Martinez," he said softly. She froze. The color drained from her face as she stared at him, confusion replacing the arrogance. "How do you know my name?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a simple business card. No fancy logos, no gold embossing, just his name and a phone number. But as he placed it on the counter, Jessica's eyes widened in recognition. The card read, "Marcus Williams, Williams Foundation, supporting medical research and patient care." The store fell silent except for the soft classical music playing overhead. Jessica's hands began to tremble as memories flooded back. Memories of a man in simple clothes who had appeared in the hospital 3 years ago, who had quietly paid for Carmen's first surgery, who had disappeared before she could properly thank him. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible. "No, that's not possible." Marcus picked up the business card and slipped it back into his wallet. His movements were deliberate, calm, as if he had all the time in the world. "I believe I'll take my business elsewhere," he said simply. As he turned to leave, Jessica's voice cracked behind him. "Wait, please wait." But Marcus was already walking toward the door, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The other customers parted like the sea, suddenly aware that they had witnessed something significant, something that would change how this story ended. Jessica ran around the counter, her heels clicking frantically on the stone. "Sir, please, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you, The door chimed as Marcus stepped outside into the bright afternoon sunlight. He paused for just a moment, looking back through the glass at Jessica's desperate face, before disappearing into the crowd on the busy street. Inside the store, Jessica stood frozen in the doorway, her mind racing back to a time when hope had seemed impossible, when a stranger's kindness had saved her sister's life. Now that same stranger had walked away, carrying with him the dignity she had tried to strip from him. The other customers began to murmur among themselves, piecing together what they had witnessed. Someone had filmed the entire encounter. By tomorrow, this moment would be shared across social media, but for now Jessica was alone with the crushing weight of her mistake. Richard approached her cautiously. "Jessica, what was that about? Do you know that man?" She turned to face her manager, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in weeks, the worry about Carmen's medical bills was replaced by something far worse. The knowledge that she had humiliated the very person who had already saved her family once before. Marcus walked slowly down Fifth Avenue, his hands deep in his pockets, the sounds of the city washing over him like waves. The afternoon sun felt warm on his face, but inside he carried the familiar weight of disappointment. Not in Jessica, but in a world that still judged him by the color of his skin and the simplicity of his clothes. He found a bench in a small park 2 blocks away and sat down heavily. Around him, life continued its relentless pace. Children played on swings while their parents watched from nearby benches. An elderly man fed pigeons from a paper bag. A young couple shared ice cream, laughing at some private joke. Marcus closed his eyes and let his mind drift back 3 years, to a sterile hospital corridor that smelled of disinfectant and despair. He had been there for a board meeting at St. Mary's Hospital, discussing the Williams Foundation's latest donation for their pediatric wing. As he walked through the waiting area, he had noticed a young woman sitting alone in a corner chair, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Miss?" He had approached her carefully, his voice gentle. "Are you all right?" Jessica had looked up with red, swollen eyes, clearly embarrassed to be seen crying by a stranger. She wiped her face quickly with a tissue. "I'm sorry, I'm fine. Just waiting for news about my sister." "Carmen Martinez, room 307? Marcus had asked, already knowing the answer. He had reviewed her case file just an hour earlier, a 19-year-old girl with a rare heart condition requiring immediate surgery. Jessica's eyes had widened in surprise. "How did you know?" "I'm involved with the hospital's funding committee," Marcus had explained simply. "Your sister's case came across my desk this morning. The surgery she needs. It's experimental, but it has a 92% success rate." "I know," Jessica had whispered, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "But the insurance won't cover it. They say it's too risky, too expensive. We need $150,000 that we don't have. I've applied for loans, started a GoFundMe, even considered selling my car, but it's not enough, not even close." Marcus had studied her face, seeing in it the same desperate love he had felt for his own younger brother, who had died because their family couldn't afford the medical care he needed. That was 30 years ago, when Marcus was building his first construction company from nothing, when every dollar mattered more than air. "What if I told you there might be another way?" Marcus had asked. "I'd say you were being kind, But there isn't, Jessica had replied, her voice hollow with defeat. I've explored every option. Carmen's going to die because we're poor and there's nothing I can do about it. Marcus had pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Dr. Richardson, this is Marcus Williams. Yes, the Carmen Martinez case. I want to cover the full cost of her surgery. No. Anonymously. Yes, all of it. Including post-operative care and rehabilitation. Tomorrow morning would be perfect. Jessica had stared at him in shock, unable to process what she was hearing. I don't understand. Who are you? Just someone who believes that financial circumstances shouldn't determine whether someone lives or dies, Marcus had said, standing to leave. Your sister is going to be fine. Wait, Jessica had called after him. I can't let you do this. I don't even know your name. How can I ever repay you? Marcus had paused in the doorway, looking back at her tear-streaked face. You don't repay kindness, he had said quietly. You pass it on. Now sitting on the park bench, Marcus opened his eyes and watched the pigeons pecking at crumbs near his feet. He had kept tabs on Carmen's recovery through the hospital's reports. The surgery had been successful. She had returned to college, graduated with honors, and was now working as a pediatric nurse at the same hospital where she had once been a patient. Jessica had tried to find him for months afterward, asking hospital staff, searching online, even hiring a private investigator. But Marcus had ensured his donation remained anonymous, his identity protected. He had learned long ago that true generosity required no recognition, no gratitude, no strings attached. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his assistant, reminding him about the board meeting at 4 o'clock. The Williams Foundation was considering funding a new children's wing at Metropolitan Hospital. The irony wasn't lost on him. While Jessica had been humiliating him for not belonging in a jewelry store, he was preparing to donate $2 million to help sick children. Marcus thought about his own journey, how he had built his construction empire from a single truck, and a determination to never let poverty define him again. He remembered the countless times he had been turned away from banks, dismissed by investors, told that people like him didn't belong in boardrooms or country clubs. The difference was that each rejection had only strengthened his resolve. Each insult had become fuel for his success. And when success finally came, he had made a promise to himself. He would use his wealth to ensure that others didn't have to suffer the way he and his brother had suffered. Back at the jewelry store, Jessica sat in the employee break room, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face, not the expression of anger she would have expected, but something far worse. Disappointment mixed with understanding. She pulled out her phone and searched for Williams Foundation. The website was simple, elegant, with photos of children in hospitals, families receiving keys to new homes, students graduating from college. The foundation's mission statement read, "Believing that every person deserves dignity, opportunity, and hope." If this story is touching your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Jessica scrolled through testimonials from families the foundation had helped. There were hundreds of them. A single mother whose medical bills had been paid, a veteran who received a new prosthetic leg, children who received scholarships to attend college. The amounts ranged from hundreds to hundreds of thousands of dollars, all given quietly without fanfare. She found a news article from 2 years ago about Marcus Williams, founder and president of the Williams Foundation. The photo showed him at a hospital dedication ceremony, wearing the same simple clothes she had mocked, the same gentle expression she had misinterpreted as weakness. The article detailed his background. Born into poverty in Detroit, lost his younger brother to a treatable illness because his family couldn't afford medical care, worked construction jobs while putting himself through business school, built a multi-million-dollar construction empire, then dedicated his life to ensuring that financial circumstances never again determined whether someone lived or died. Jessica's supervisor, Richard, appeared in the doorway. "Jessica, I need to talk to you about what happened today. That man, Several customers recorded the incident. It's already being shared online. I know, Jessica said quietly, not looking up from her phone. Do you want to tell me who he was? Jessica set down her phone and looked up at Richard with eyes full of regret. He was the man who saved my sister's life. 3 years ago, when Carmen needed heart surgery, a stranger appeared at the hospital and paid for everything. $150,000. Anonymous donation. I spent months trying to find him, to thank him. Richard's face went pale. And today? Today I told him he didn't belong in our store because of how he looked. Jessica's voice cracked. I humiliated the most generous person I've ever encountered because I was too stressed and too prejudiced to see past his appearance. Outside the jewelry store, the late afternoon shadows grew longer, and somewhere across the city, Marcus Williams sat in a boardroom, approving another donation that would change another family's life forever. He had already forgotten about the incident at the store, but he would never forget the promise he made to his dying brother 30 years ago, that he would spend his life ensuring that kindness, not cruelty, had the final word. The next morning, Jessica arrived at the jewelry store 30 minutes before opening, her eyes red from a sleepless night. She had spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of yesterday's encounter, every cruel inflection in her voice. The weight of her mistake felt heavier than the humid morning air that clung to the city streets. She unlocked the store and walked directly to the case containing the diamond bracelet Marcus had wanted to see. $8,000. For a man who had donated $150,000 to save her sister's life, $8,000 was probably what he spent on lunch. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The video of yesterday's incident had been shared over 10,000 times overnight. The comments ranged from outrage at her behavior to speculation about who the mysterious man was. Some viewers had already identified Marcus Williams and were sharing stories of his generosity. Jessica's face burned with shame as she read comment after comment condemning her actions. At exactly 9 o'clock, the store's front door chimed. Jessica looked up expectantly, hoping against hope that Marcus might return, that she might have a chance to apologize properly. Instead, she saw a young woman in scrubs walking purposefully toward the counter. It was Carmen. "Jessica Martinez?" the woman asked, though her face already showed recognition. Jessica's heart stopped. Carmen was beautiful, vibrant, alive, everything she had been fighting to preserve 3 years ago. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her brown eyes sparkled with health and energy. She wore pediatric nursing scrubs decorated with cartoon animals, and a stethoscope hung around her neck like a badge of hope. "Carmen?" Jessica whispered, confusion flooding her voice. "What are you doing here? How did you—" "I saw the video," Carmen said simply. "Everyone at the hospital is talking about it. Do you have any idea what you did yesterday?" Jessica's legs felt weak. She gripped the edge of the counter for support. "I know I made a terrible mistake. I know I hurt someone who had only shown us kindness." Carmen shook her head, her expression a mixture of disappointment and something deeper, a sadness that seemed to come from her very soul. "Jessica, that man didn't just save my life. He saved our entire family." "I know about the surgery." "No," Carmen interrupted firmly. "You don't know everything. Sit down." Jessica sank into the chair behind the counter as Carmen began to speak, her voice steady but emotional. "After my surgery, when I was recovering, I started asking questions about my anonymous donor. The hospital staff couldn't tell me much, but I learned that the Williams Foundation had been quietly helping families at St. Mary's for years, not just with one-time payments, but with ongoing support." Carmen pulled out her phone and showed Jessica a photo of herself in a cap and gown. "My nursing degree? The Williams Foundation paid for all 4 years of school. Every textbook, every fee, even my living expenses so I could focus on studying instead of working 3 jobs like you were doing." Jessica stared at the photo, her vision blurring with tears. "And Mom's physical therapy after her car accident last year?" Carmen continued. "The insurance only covered 6 sessions. The Williams Foundation covered 6 months. That's why she can walk again without a cane." The revelation hit Jessica like a physical blow. She remembered her mother's miraculous recovery, How the physical therapist had said someone had taken care of everything. They had assumed it was some kind of insurance error in their favor. And Dad's restaurant? Carmen's voice grew softer. When the pandemic hit and he was about to lose everything, the foundation gave him an interest-free loan to keep the doors open. He still doesn't know it wasn't from the bank. Jessica felt the room spinning around her. Every good thing that had happened to their family in the past 3 years, every moment of relief from financial stress, every opportunity that had seemed too good to be true, it all traced back to Marcus Williams. Why? Jessica gasped. Why would he do all of this for strangers? Carmen sat down across from her sister, reaching across the counter to take her hands. I researched him extensively after I became a nurse. I wanted to understand the kind of person who could be so generous. His younger brother died when Marcus was 25 because their family couldn't afford the medical treatment he needed. Marcus swore that day that no one else would lose a loved one to poverty if he could prevent it. She pulled up another photo on her phone, a newspaper clipping from 30 years ago showing a much younger Marcus Williams at his brother's funeral. Even in the grainy black and white image, the grief on his face was unmistakable. He's been giving away most of his wealth for decades, Carmen explained. He lives in a modest apartment, drives a 15-year-old truck, wears simple clothes. Everything else goes to the foundation. He could live like a king, but instead he chooses to live like a monk so that families like ours can have hope. Jessica was crying openly now, her tears falling onto the glass counter. Carmen, I called him people like you. I told him he didn't belong in this store. I laughed at him. I know, Carmen said gently. And now you understand why it hurt so much. Not because of his pride, but because he spent his entire adult life fighting the same prejudices you showed him yesterday. The store's front door chimed again, and both women looked up to see Richard entering for his morning shift. His expression was grim as he approached the counter. Jessica, we need to talk, he said, then noticed Carmen. I'm sorry, we're not open yet. Actually, Carmen stood up, her professional demeanor returning. I think you need to hear this too. I'm Carmen Martinez, Jessica's sister. I'm also a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, and I have some information about the man you both mistreated yesterday. For the next 20 minutes, Carmen told Richard everything she had just shared with Jessica. She showed him the foundation's website, the news articles about Marcus's philanthropy, the testimonials from hundreds of families he had helped. By the time she finished, Richard's face had gone ashen. My God, he whispered. We insulted a man who's donated millions to help people. Not just millions, Carmen corrected. According to the latest tax filings I could find, the Williams Foundation has given away over $50 million in the past decade alone. Jessica looked up from her hands, her voice barely audible. What do I do? How do I even begin to apologize for something like this? Carmen considered the question carefully. Marcus Williams doesn't seek recognition or apologies. He seeks to make the world better. If you really want to make amends, you need to understand that this isn't about you anymore. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street where Marcus had disappeared the day before. He came to your store yesterday to buy a gift for someone special. That bracelet he wanted to see? I guarantee it wasn't for him. It was probably for another family member of someone he'd helped, another small gesture in a lifetime of small gestures that add up to something extraordinary. Richard approached the case containing the diamond bracelet. $8,000, he murmured. For him, that's pocket change. But for someone receiving it as a gift from him, it would have been priceless. Jessica wiped her eyes and stood up straighter. I need to find him. I need to apologize and give him the bracelet. Actually, Carmen smiled for the first time since entering the store. I might be able to help with that. There's a board meeting at Metropolitan Hospital this afternoon. The Williams Foundation is considering funding a new children's wing. As a nurse at St. Mary's, I have connections. She pulled out her phone and began typing. But Jessica, you need to understand something. This isn't about making yourself feel better. This is about honoring the kindness of a man who has spent his life lifting others up, even when the world tries to tear him down. As Carmen sent her message, the morning sun streamed through the store's windows, illuminating the diamond bracelet that sparkled like captured stars. Somewhere across the city, Marcus Williams was preparing for another day of quiet generosity, unaware that the family he had saved was finally ready to save him in return. The video of yesterday's humiliation was still spreading across social media, but by tonight Jessica hoped it would be overshadowed by a very different kind of story, one of redemption, recognition, and the power of kindness to transform even the deepest shame into something beautiful. That afternoon, Jessica stood outside Metropolitan Hospital with the diamond bracelet carefully wrapped in elegant paper, her hands trembling slightly as she watched the entrance. Carmen had texted her 20 minutes ago. "He's here. Third-floor conference room. Board meeting starts at 3. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 years ago, she had waited in this same hospital, desperate and broken, while a stranger saved her sister's life. Today, she was here to save that stranger's dignity. The elevator ride to the third floor felt eternal. Jessica's reflection in the polished steel doors showed a woman transformed by 24 hours of revelation. Gone was the arrogant store clerk who had judged a man by his appearance. In her place stood someone humbled by the magnitude of her mistake and determined to make it right. She found the conference room easily. Voices carried through the partially open door as board members discussed funding allocations. Through the glass panel, she could see Marcus sitting at the far end of a long table, wearing the same simple clothes from yesterday, listening intently as a doctor presented plans for the new children's wing. Jessica knocked softly and waited. A woman in a business suit opened the door. "I'm sorry, this is a private meeting," the woman said politely. "I need to speak with Marcus Williams," Jessica replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's about the Williams Foundation and something that happened yesterday." The woman studied Jessica's face, perhaps recognizing the sincerity in her eyes, then turned back to the room. "Mr. Williams, there's someone here to see you." Marcus looked up, and when his eyes met Jessica's through the doorway, something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not vindication, but a quiet curiosity mixed with concern. He excused himself from the meeting and stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of yesterday's encounter hanging between them like an invisible wall. "Mr. Williams," Jessica began, her voice cracking slightly, "I owe you an apology that no words can adequately express." Marcus studied her face with the same patient attention he had shown in the jewelry store. "Jessica, isn't it? You don't need to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted gently but firmly. "I need to say this not just for you but for me and for Carmen and for everyone who witnessed what I did yesterday." She took a deep breath and continued. "Yesterday I was having the worst day. My sister Carmen needs another surgery, a follow-up procedure, and I was drowning in worry about the medical bills. When you walked into our store, I saw everything I was afraid of becoming. Someone the world might overlook, dismiss, judge unfairly. So I became the very thing I feared most. I became someone who judges others by their appearance instead of their character." Marcus listened without interrupting, his dark eyes reflecting understanding rather than anger. "But what makes my actions unforgivable," Jessica's voice grew stronger, "is that you had already saved my family. Not just Carmen's surgery 3 years ago, but everything that came after. Her nursing degree, our mother's physical therapy, our father's restaurant. You've been our guardian angel for years, and I repaid your kindness with cruelty." She held out the wrapped bracelet. "This doesn't make up for what I did. Nothing can. But Carmen told me you came to buy this for someone special, and I want you to have it. No charge, it's the least I can do." Marcus looked at the package but didn't take it. Instead, he smiled. The first genuine smile Jessica had seen from him. "The bracelet was for Carmen," he said quietly. "I've been following her career at St. Mary's. When I heard she was being promoted to head pediatric nurse, I wanted to give her something to mark the occasion. Something beautiful to remind her that she survived, that she thrived, that she's now helping other children the way she was once helped." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Even after her cruelty, he had been planning another act of kindness for her sister. Mr. Williams, Marcus, he corrected gently. And Jessica, I need you to understand something. What happened yesterday wasn't unforgivable. It was human. You were in pain, overwhelmed by circumstances beyond your control, and you lashed out. I've been there. We all have. He gestured toward the conference room door. Do you know why I do this work? Why I give away most of what I earn? Jessica shook her head. Because 30 years ago, I was the angry young man standing in a hospital corridor, furious at a world that let my brother die because we couldn't afford to save him. I spent years carrying that rage, letting it poison every interaction, every relationship. It wasn't until I learned to transform that pain into purpose that I found peace. He paused, looking out the window at the city below. Yesterday, when you spoke to me with such contempt, I didn't see cruelty. I saw pain. The same pain I once carried, and I thought about how I might help, not hurt you more. Jessica stared at him in amazement. You thought about helping me, after what I did? Marcus nodded. Carmen's follow-up surgery that's worrying you? It's already been approved for funding through the foundation. The paperwork was submitted this morning. The hallway seemed to spin around Jessica. Even after her humiliation of him, he had arranged to help her family again. Why? She whispered. Because that's what love looks like, Marcus replied simply. Not romantic love, but human love. The recognition that we're all struggling. We're all imperfect. We're all deserving of compassion. Through the conference room door, they could hear the meeting resuming. Marcus needed to return, but he had one more thing to say. Jessica, I want you to keep the bracelet. Give it to Carmen when she gets her promotion next month. Tell her it's a reminder that kindness always wins, even when it takes time to recognize itself. As he turned to go back into the meeting, Jessica called after him softly. Marcus, the video of what happened yesterday, it's everywhere. People are saying terrible things about me. I deserve it, but nothing, Marcus interrupted. Tomorrow I'm going to post something on the Foundation's social media. Not about you, not about yesterday, but about the importance of grace, forgiveness, and second chances. The internet loves a good redemption story even more than it loves public shaming. The conference room door closed behind him, leaving Jessica alone in the hallway with the bracelet and a heart so full it felt like it might burst. Through the glass, she watched Marcus return to his seat, immediately focusing on the hospital administrator's presentation about sick children who needed help. That evening, Jessica sat with Carmen in their childhood bedroom, the diamond bracelet sparkling between them on the old quilt their grandmother had made. So he planned to give this to me all along? Carmen asked, holding the bracelet up to catch the lamplight. Even after I humiliated him, even knowing I might not deserve his kindness. Jessica shook her head in wonder. Carmen, I don't think I've ever met anyone like him. Carmen fastened the bracelet around her wrist, the diamonds catching the warm glow of the bedside lamp. You know what the most beautiful part is? This isn't unusual for him. According to the nurses at the hospital, he does things like this all the time. Quiet gestures, anonymous gifts, small acts of recognition for people who make a difference. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Jessica, what happened yesterday wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of one. You learned something about yourself, about judgment, about the danger of assumptions. That lesson is going to make you a better person for the rest of your life. Jessica joined her sister at the window. I keep thinking about what he said, about transforming pain into purpose. Maybe that's your assignment now, Carmen suggested. Take the shame you feel about yesterday and turn it into compassion for the next person who's having their worst day. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Click the next one, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes in kindness. 3 months later, Marcus Williams received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo of Jessica at a community volunteer event, serving meals to homeless families. On the back in careful handwriting were the words, "Thank you for showing me that love looks like action. Jessica." He smiled and placed the photo in his desk drawer, next to hundreds of other thank you notes from lives he had touched. Outside his office window, the city hummed with millions of stories of pain and healing, judgment and forgiveness, cruelty and kindness. And in a jewelry store across town, a young woman greeted each customer with the recognition that everyone who walked through her door was fighting battles she couldn't see, carrying dreams she couldn't imagine, deserving of dignity she had the power to give or take away. The bracelet Marcus had chosen still sparkled on Carmen's wrist as she made her rounds at the hospital, a daily reminder that kindness ripples outward in ways we can never fully measure. Some gifts are measured in diamonds. Others are measured in the transformation of hearts. In the end, the most valuable thing Marcus Williams gave the Martinez family wasn't money. It was the understanding that true wealth comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we give away, and that the greatest gift we can offer another person is the recognition of their inherent dignity and worth. The man they mocked had indeed saved them years before, but in the end, he saved them again, not from medical bills or financial ruin, but from the poverty of spirit that comes from living without grace, without compassion, without the understanding that we are all, every one of us, deserving of love.